Hi, I'm a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, and on behalf of the Atlantic Council and South Asia Centre, we are holding this very important conversation with Mr. Ahmad Massoud to talk about the current political and security situation in Afghanistan and how he sees the evolution of this war and indeed the political solution. Thank you, Ahmad, for joining us, and it's a very critical time right now in Afghanistan, and in my last week here I've seen how districts are falling, provinces are falling, and of course the main concern is that with 4 of the border crossings gone, the question mark was that the Afghan National Defense Security Forces either had gone across the border and sought refuge in Tajikistan or had simply abandoned their posts. As a result, there was a genuine people's popular uprising asking for several leaders, including yourself, Ismail Khan, Atanur, to take up arms and defend the people. One thing is for sure, the people do not want the incoming Taliban forces. How does the mobilization of the forces such as the ones you are leading, how will they coordinate with the Afghan military and the security forces, since there seems to be a disconnect? Ismail Khan publicly said that the government has not reached out in time, and also we've seen in Badakhshan and Takhar there was a complaint that the government had not reached out in time. So there seems to be a feeling that yes, everyone is united and supports the Afghan military to fight against the Taliban. How do you see the military and security situation evolving?
Well, first and foremost, welcome to Afghanistan, and thank you, and also thanks to Atlantic Council for this opportunity. To answer that question, we need to head back to what happened in the past 20 years. The roots of the problem of today, it is in the past 20 years, and how the political situation in here has been developed, how the political system in Afghanistan has been established in the past 20 years, and how especially the Afghanistan armed forces has been established and the system that they have been established. Unfortunately, it has been very clear to us, and this is something that we have been very vocal about it in the past few years, that there is a huge issue with political system, with the trust of the people to political system and their support to the political system, and especially Afghanistan armed forces, that Afghanistan armed forces, without the presence of foreign troops and foreign support, it cannot continue like this. And we were right, unfortunately. And this is exactly what happened, that we see all of these territorial gain by the Taliban, which happened very rapidly. It was already we could see it, that it is coming, and it was already, the signs was there. What we believe, and that what should have happened is that Afghanistan armed forces should have been localized, just the way, and decentralized, just the way that political system should have been decentralized. Afghanistan as a country is containing many ethnicities and groups and religion and ideologies and beliefs. When we are centralizing everything, the power, the army, the politic, the wealth, of course the corruption as one of the main thing is gonna happen. Just the way that we have been told that we have 300,000 armed forces, but in reality that was just a lie. It was a part of the big corruption that happened in Afghanistan. And just like that, unfortunately, the people and this distrust and distance and the gap happened between them and the government. It all led to the current situation. And this was the reason that the figures like Mr. Ismail Khan or Atanur or myself, we have been under the pressure of the people, that we had to do something to defend the people of Afghanistan. And we saw today, with the recent activity and bravery of the son of Marshal Dostum and Sheberghan, that how much the people are actually enjoying such actions against the Taliban. It shows how much the people need figures to support them, to rely on, to trust, and to be with. And it shows that unfortunately the system is failing and the system is not answering, and the people do not trust that the system will be able to save them. Because the people due to the political system, due to the ego and ethnic-centric policies, and due to various other reasons, it is not able, and also corruption as one of the big and main thing, it is not able to reach out to the people in time and to really give them the support that they need. And this is causing a lot of issue, and this is causing a lot of distrust. And this is why that the people from Dostum to others, they have been the reliable partner or the reliable hope for the people of Afghanistan, for the local, especially like constituencies, to reach out to their constituents and to help them, support them in time. And this is what is happening. This is what should have happened in the past 20 years, that we had to decentralize even the armed forces. We had to have a centralized army, and at the same time these local groups to be able to protect their own land, to protect their own sort of constituencies in align and support of the government and also under the constitution. So this was something, and this could happen, this could have been something to really work, a model to really, under the constitution, under the sort of the protection of the government, aligned with the armed forces, it could have had an amazing result. Unfortunately, it did not happen, and we see that the government, due to various factors, is sending some groups or some people to be responsible in some local area that they do not have either the experience, or they are not good with the people, or they do not have the sort of the support of the people, for or whatever other reasons. It has not worked before, and now is something that I believe that now that Americans and the West is allocating a big budget for Afghanistan annually. For example, Americans are allocating $3.3 billion for Afghanistan. Unfortunately, as long as these problems exist, and as long as so-called sort of a centralized system exists, we cannot defeat extremism, and we cannot, or we will not be able to resist against them for so long. And we will lose, and we will exhaust Afghanistan army, which is one of the biggest achievements of the past 2 decades. So to counter that, we need to support the local resistance. We need to support the constituencies which are ready to defend their constituency against the terrorism, and help them and support them, and they will give legitimacy and support to the central government as well. So this is something that should have happened, and right now, those commanders and those military leaders or those political leaders and figures who are fighting against the Taliban in many areas, they are actually the backbone of the government right now. Those are the figures that, although that they are very vocal and they are criticizing the government, but just like the past 20 years, they are not revolutionary. They are reformers. They want the things to be better, but they are not after toppling or dethroning anything or anyone. So this is the thing that is happening right now. Supporting the local resistance, supporting the uprising of the people, and allocating a budget to really not once again fall in the hand of the corrupted people and the corruption is essential in fighting and stopping terrorism in Afghanistan.
Oh, absolutely, and this leads to the next point, or that you've mentioned in your op-ed, New York Times, and in your various interviews with the American press about the decentralization, that the power in Afghanistan is absolutely centralized in Kabul, and whilst historically this has been true, this has not led to a political stability.
Yeah.
And even now, as we see the fragmentation, especially of the periphery of Afghanistan, which also then leads to instability in the neighboring countries, whilst we see whether it's in the west with Ismail Khan, whether it's Dostum in the north, or in the northeast in the area where you are, what's the kind of political outlook going forward in terms of a decentralized system whereby everyone has equal resources? The American taxpayer is asking what has happened to the billions of dollars, and it's not a secret, we don't have to repeat it, that so much has gone missing.
Yeah.
And one cannot simply ignore the governance issues here, whether it's from a military perspective or it's a perspective of justice and accountability.
Well, this is the main issue of Afghanistan for the past few centuries, not just few decades. Afghanistan always has been trying to push for the narrative of a centralized government. It has not worked, it will not work. no matter how much billions of more of dollars we spend in it or we invest in it, or no matter how longer we fight or we try to fight for this dream, it has not worked ever, and it will not work in the future, because Afghanistan is a multicultural state, and in such multicultural state, in a land of minority, a very centralized government is not in favor of anyone. Let me give you a very small example of what happened, for example, in the past 20 years. Kandahar, the recent barbaric, mini genocide that happened in Kandahar, that from Achekzai, 900 elders and influential figures has been slaughtered and murdered. And it is a clear sign of the sort of how to say, it's revenge and seeking revenge after not being able to be represented properly in that area by the other tribe. So it's in a very small area. In a bigger scale, among the ethnicities in Afghanistan, the story is kind of the same. We have many vivid and clear evidence and signs that unfortunately the decisions which was made by the central government has not been supported by the people in the areas in the region, by all ethnicities, either if it's Pashtun or Tajik or Uzbek or Hazaras. And this led to the discomfort, distrust and distance between the country and between the constituents and between the people and the government. And this gap created opportunity for extremism, for the people who are against the country, against the state, to really act and to recruit and to invest. And this is why in many areas that the people, the government was so unpopular that when the Taliban came, it was not that they were supporting Taliban, but also they did not do anything. Because they were like, well, both of them are equally bad for us. So this is kind of the story, that how unfortunately social justice in Afghanistan cannot be achieved through a centralized system. And Afghan people do not want to wait for a messiah figure to come and save them, or to provide them with justice. They want a system to be just, not a man to be just. So for this reason, a centralized government cannot be just for people of Afghanistan and fair. And we have all the evidence, and this is another thing that we have been very vocal about it, that unfortunately although we are very appreciating and we are very grateful for all the investment that happened in Afghanistan in the past 2 decades, but due to the wrong system, we have not been able to really use it in the right way, or to be able to be appreciating it the right way. And the reason being was that decentralized government is the mother of all problems, first and foremost. And secondly, it has not been a strategic partner for international community to fight against the terrorism. That's why we have not achieved anything in the past 2 decades with all the investment and all the presence of the troops, because the international community and our international force in Afghanistan, they did not have a strategic partner, a reliable one, to really counter the terrorism and to achieve the strategic goals that international community has set for themselves when they entered Afghanistan. To do so, they needed a strategic partner. A centralized government of Afghanistan is unable to be a strategic partner, or unable to be a good government or a state, for people of Afghanistan and also for the world. This was the main reason that the corruption grew in Afghanistan. This is the main reason that there has been a lot of fatigue regarding Afghanistan situation. And this is the main reason that Afghanistan of today is very unstable and insecure. To counter that, the political narrative and solution to Afghanistan is decentralization. Unfortunately, when the time came that the generation like myself and others, that we have studied in the West, that we had been able to really figure the problems of Afghanistan, that we are thinking beyond just our personal, preferences or personal benefits. When it came to this generation that could really be the strategic partner for international community, to establish a decentralized good government in Afghanistan, to be a strategic partner for international community, they have left. And this was the time to really, after all those investment, to gain from Afghanistan by stability, security, and a lot of other things. But it did not happen. So this is our goal, our aim. All the fightings, all the resisting, it is for peace, it is for establishing a government to be able to live peacefully with each other and with the world.
Absolutely. In terms of the Doha peace process, which was obviously something from the previous administration, and President Ghani legitimately said that this is not a peace deal with the Afghan government. This was between the Taliban and the United States. Now, of course, with the new administration and the US pullout, we are seeing the repercussions, as we've just discussed, in terms of the military fallout. But in terms of the intra-Afghan dialogue, before one could go to talk to the Taliban, we've seen the problems in the previous election. However, Dr. Abdullah and Ashraf Ghani came together. How does one view potentially talking to the Taliban? There is talk that the Taliban does not want to take cities militarily. However, we see, as we speak now, there's heavy fighting in the north, in the south, the east and the west. The people reject the Taliban. Some people have said this is a reformed Taliban, but we've seen the massacres, as you mentioned, in Kandahar, we've seen in Herat. They are not reformed.
Absolutely.
How does one live with the fact that there is a deal that's been signed, the Taliban are expecting to come into power, that delegation goes to Russia, that delegation goes to China, to Qatar, to Pakistan, to Iran. They're acting as a government in waiting. How do you see a way forward, given militarily the situation is extremely tense? But politically, is there a way forward with the Taliban, given the people are rejecting them?
Well, to begin with, one thing is that we are always welcoming peace. So any effort for peace, it is something that the people of Afghanistan and us, we welcome it. And even to this day, even till last day, as long as we are here, our peace offer or on our right hand is always stretched to the Taliban, and we are always ready to talk and negotiate. And we believe that no group is able to really implement their own beliefs with war or through like military takeover. Whoever wants to be a part of a future of Afghanistan should really try to engage in political engagement and talks and peaceful or peace negotiation and peace talks. However, the way that everything has been set up, the deal, the talks, negotiation that happened between Americans and the Taliban, I told them that it is a recipe for disaster. I had few meetings with them, and I told them specifically the reasons that it is not going to work. Unfortunately, one of the catalysts and one of the main factors in reason for today's events that is happening in Afghanistan, the instability and security problems in Afghanistan, and demoralization of soldiers in the battleground, the Afghan soldiers, those who fought alongside the international community against the terrorism, is the peace deal and the peace talks between Americans and the Taliban. This is a fact. This is something that we can clearly see the evidence and signs. Unfortunately, it happened, although that I blame the Afghans that after 20 years we had to be able to build a country and a state to be able to defend itself for many years to come. However, there are many factors which we spoke, it did not happen, and we have been vocal about it. However, nowadays, with the current situation, my personal opinion is that the Doha talk is over. There is no way that the Taliban, with the current momentum that they have gained because of the problems, because of the mistakes, political mistake, the problem of the government of Afghanistan and the political and the strategic mistakes that the West made regarding the talks with the Taliban, that they are ready to come to the table and talk. However, if there have been some readjustment regarding the dealing with the Taliban, with the deal that they had with the Taliban, and also the support for Afghan forces, and then I believe that the people of Afghanistan and we will be able to resist, and we will be able in some time to make the Taliban realize that the only way forward is through peace talks. And I have been in talk with many regional powers as well, that they are willing to host and they are willing to participate in bringing Taliban also on the table, and also to talk regarding the peace process, and to make them to really understand that the regional powers are also not accepting a Taliban regime by force. So they were ready to play a part in bringing all together and creating a very inclusive government. And that is something that we are promoting and we are saying. We are not denying the role of the Taliban. Although that I need to emphasize on this fact that the Taliban have not been reformed, that even they have been worse because of what they have learned from Al-Qaeda, that still to this day they have a strong link and connection together because of what they have learned from the ISIS and what they have learned from the Syria events. So they have been even more radicalized than their fathers who fought in the 90s. So this is something that we need to be very clear, that they have not been reformed and they have even been more extremist and they have been more radicalized. However, even with that, if the Taliban are ready to participate in a peace talk, if they are ready to end the war and come to sort of a political agreement, they are more than welcome, and we are ready, and people of Afghanistan are forgiving, and we are forgiving. As a son of a martyr, as a son of someone who has lost his life in the war and the fighting against the Taliban and terrorism, I'm willing and ready to forgive the blood of my father for the sake of peace in Afghanistan and security and stability in Afghanistan. Afghan people are ready to paying the price, they are ready to sacrifice. However, one thing that we cannot do is to give in to the will of terrorism. It is not something that will not happen. We are ready to talk, we are ready to to negotiate, we are ready to participate, we are ready to create inclusive government with the Taliban, but we are not ready to accept for extremism and fundamentalism to establish extremist narrative or government in here, because it is something which will be really bad, not just for Afghanistan, it will be a regional threat, it will be a sort of international threat.
Absolutely, and picking up from the point of terrorism and Al-Qaeda, you remember the last 20 years, the war on terror, as it was named by former President Bush, at the Afghanistan-Pakistan border seemed to have been the front line. However, with the advent of the Iraq war and the fragmentation of Iraq, the international terrorists had moved into Iraq and Syria. We saw thousands of foreign fighters going to fight in Syria. It now seems to me, and it seems to the world, that a lot of those fighters are coming back, some into northern Afghanistan, some in the south, which will of course destabilize Central Asia, China, Iran, Pakistan. How do you see the relationship, which is seen as the elephant in the room, with Pakistan? Because at the moment the relationship is at all-time low, the ambassadors were recalled, and we also see with the recent attacks in Afghanistan, the people blaming Pakistan. How can a workable relationship with Pakistan be built given the lack of trust and the history?
Well, one thing is that, as my father said when he was alive, is that it is very important that if there is a change in the policies in Islamabad regarding Afghanistan, that we have no issue with Pakistan, and Pakistan is our neighbor and a brotherly country. It was his dream, and it is something that even to this day, this is something that we have been saying, that Pakistan is our neighbor, and we can play a big role for stability in each other's country. So I personally believe that a good relationship, a good governmental relationship, is essential for ending the violence and building a trust and building a strategic relationship, and guaranteeing the national interest of both countries. And it is something which is very important, and I hope that it happens and we reach to that sort of the level. And however, there are many questions, there are many doubts, and this is something that we need to understand, and we need to know that there are many spoilers as well from both sides that are not willing and that are not ready, that do not want this relationship to really go forward, for a trust to be built between the two governments and between the two countries. And unfortunately, day by day, especially with the recent increase in violence, especially now that most of the leaders of the Taliban, they're in Pakistan, and they have been living in Pakistan, and there's been clear evidences that unfortunately there has not been a good governmental sort of work in preventing the sort of the transition, or the sort of the transmit of those troops and those figures, and having some sort of a pressure on them, or having some sort of a pressure on the Taliban. And this lack of cooperation between the two governments, it is increasing the lack of the trust. It is increasing, unfortunately, the problem, and it is increasing the distrust and the hostility between the two governments. Once again, this is something which I believe Pakistan and Afghanistan, they can play a big role in stability and security in each other's country. And so far, because of various reasons and because of the problem from both sides and the spoilers in both countries, we have not been able to achieve that important goal that we just spoke. To do it, at the start of the talks, building a sort of a trust, it is essential, it is important, that I hope we can achieve that. So far, there has been some efforts, there has been some sort of trying, but the result has not been very sort of tangible. I hope that we see some effort, because if there is even minimal effort happens, then many things will be, the changes will be visible in Afghanistan, because Pakistan can play a big role both in the stability in Afghanistan and also in the stability.
And how about the US? There's a lot of criticism of President Biden in the way the sudden pullout, although some would say it's not a sudden pullout. There's been a 20-year patience that the US has shown in Afghanistan. And indeed, President Biden, of course, was one of the most experienced politicians. As a senator and as vice president, he's followed Afghanistan very closely. And we see in the last few weeks a number of US veterans. Some are serving in Congress and Senate, some are now policymakers, whether in the think tank circuit. There is still a lot of concern and commitment from the US. So I think the US is not pulling out financially. There is still the moral support to Afghanistan. How do you see a potential US role with all the uncertainty now in Afghanistan?
Well, although that we respect the decision, and as you said, it was clear that one day, sooner or later, the Americans, they're leaving, and we had to we had to be able to build a government to be able to defend ourselves after 20 years. But unfortunately, the one thing that happened, that I believe the decision of withdrawing from Afghanistan, and the timing of it was not suitable for peace in Afghanistan. And it would have been much better if we have reached a peace deal, or we have reached at least some agreements between the two sides inside Afghanistan. Then the announcement would have helped a lot the peace process. But unfortunately, the current announcement has helped the violence and war in Afghanistan rather than peace. The Turkey conference was a great opportunity, and Turkey could play a great role in bringing peace and bringing the two sides together. And there has been some sort of public pressure on the figures, both from the Republic side and the Taliban, to sit together in Turkey. And we could see that it was a very sort of a good opportunity for actually bringing a transition or interim government and ending the sort of these violences. Unfortunately, the announcement completely changed the situation. And once the Taliban heard about it, that there's an unconditional sort of withdrawal, then the goal was achievable, and the peace deal was sort of out of the table. And this is the cost of such announcement, unfortunately. However, once again, I need to emphasize that we respect the decision, because it's the decision that they're making, that Afghans, they should have been able to reach a conclusion by then. However, sometimes when it comes to Afghanistan, which is surrounded by many regional powers that they are after their own benefits, and also they're after the sort of fighting as proxies in Afghanistan against the other regional powers, then the strategic patience is really required for Afghanistan. And this is something that we have been sort of studying and learning and knowing, especially in the past few decades, that when it comes to Afghanistan, a strategic patience is required.
No, and I think in terms of the regional element that you mentioned, we've been talking about the regional role of countries in Afghanistan, but also with the connecting point of decentralization. We look even today or yesterday when Marshal Dostum comes back from Turkey to take command of the forces in Sheberghan and Jawzan to fight, he has support from Turkey. Recently, on the anniversary of the ending of the civil war in Tajikistan, the president of Tajikistan, named your father as the hero of Tajikistan, which clearly shows what happens on this side of the border impacts other regional countries, whether it's Tajikistan, further afield in Turkey, and of course we know about the role of Iran and Pakistan. So in the end, we are still talking about a regional finish to this war, with a summary of your analysis that the decentralization is important, yet the Afghan nationalism is strong. No one is talking about a revolution, as you say. The mobilization of popular forces and regional leaders comes at the support of the Afghan military, which indeed are fighting a very difficult war, but there needs to be a focus on bringing the regional mix into decentralization. Would you say that that seems to be the way forward then? And you've clearly said that talking and working with the Taliban is an option, but they have to show actions. They're saying things on TV that they're reformed, but their actions on the ground somehow do not back their words up. So in terms of a summary, please let us know, the regional way to end this war, as we've discussed, but also in finality, the Taliban question.
Well, first and foremost, regarding the region, one thing that before coming to the question I need to say is that you brought up a great example of how a country should be, how a neighbor should be. The Tajikistan, it was have a very bad days. The Islamic movement of Tajikistan, they have been fighting against the government of Rahman for quite some time in the 90s. And then my father and Ustad Rabbani, they brought them together, they mediate between them, and they actually opened a sort of a channel of talk and dialogue between them, and they forced them to accept each other and to reach a deal and to respect the deal. And this is how a sort of a neighbor is. Ahmad Shah Massoud and Rabbani, they ended the war in Tajikistan. And what the Tajikistan of today is, the stability that they are having, the sort of the sort of prosperity and safety and security that they are having, they owe it to Afghanistan, and they owe it to Ahmad Shah Massoud. So that's how a neighbor is. And this is what we are expecting from our neighbors as well, to play that role when it comes to Afghanistan, to mediate, to help, to end the war, not unfortunately to fuel the war. This was a game that has been played in the past many decades, that unfortunately our neighbors has been playing in this role, that fueling it, especially in the past 2 decades with the presence of America, some regional powers, to counter the Americans' presence in here, or to hit them. They have been helping the enemies of Afghanistan. They have been helping the terrorism in Afghanistan, to be able to hurt Americans in Afghanistan and to make them suffer like Vietnam. And this is unfortunately is what happened in the past 2 decades. But I hope now that there is an opportunity, the regional understand that the fire in Afghanistan, one way or another, if it has not been put out, with the help of regional and international community, one way or another, it will reach to the region, it will reach to every corner of the world. Just the way that the last time we were too late to contain it, we saw what happened in Europe, we saw what happened in America, we saw what happened across the world. And right now, if Afghanistan once again become a safe haven to harbor terrorism, international terrorism, and they find a safe haven, their families, themselves, then the world should be a witness of a horrific and horrible attacks across the world, and especially in the region. And this is something that we are in the defense line of defense, and we need the help of region and regional powers and also international world to stopping it, and at least stopping a big chunk of this group, which is the Taliban, to understand and distance themselves from the terrorist groups and come to the table and talk and to be a part of future of Afghanistan. And with this, I will come to the answer of the Taliban, is that Taliban, as you rightly mentioned, is that they are saying that they want peace, that they want Islamic government, that they have the support of people, but it is clear as a day that they do not have that, and that we are ready to make peace, but it is the Taliban who are increasing the violence, not us. It is them who are spreading the fire, not us. So once again, we are ready to talk to them. However, I strongly believe, especially the current momentum that the Taliban have, unless they see a deterrence force, a resistance force in front of them, and make them understand and realize that they are not able to achieve what they want militarily, then they will come to the table and start talking. Because what the Taliban are so after and so keen about is regional and international recognition once they establish their state. Because last time they did not have it, this time they want to achieve it and have it. For this reason, they are playing some cards when it comes to China. They are holding the Uyghurs and they're saying we will hand them over to you, or we will contain it and control them. And when it comes to the Tajikistan and Central Asia, they are playing similar games. When it comes to Iran, they are playing the similar games. So they are trying to play these sort of the cards based on the sort of the border security or national security of these regional powers to enforce themselves upon them for recognition. This is something what the Taliban have been always asked for. And one thing, if nothing happens to the people of Afghanistan, if one thing that we demand the world to listen to us is that they should not give legitimacy and recognition to the Taliban as long as they are fighting and they want to take over militarily. If they come through election or to the people's trust or through the people's decision or through a sort of a peace negotiation and political settlement, the sort of the legitimacy and recognition of the Taliban should not be an option. If they come through those meaningful factors and ways, then absolutely the world can support, can help, can continue cooperation with that legitimate government of future of Afghanistan, which Taliban can be a big part of it, a part of it, a small part of it, whatever. But that is sort of the goal that the people are demanding from the world. Recognizing the situation of Afghanistan, not given to what the Taliban have been seeking for so long. Recognition, international or regional.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming to Afghanistan. Thank you so much for this talk.
Council, and look forward to hosting you in DC.
Hopefully. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
You take care.